It's almost there.
Okay.
Okay, you're live.
Okay. Hey, welcome to our channel. We definitely know that you're going to like this, so make sure you like it and subscribe. It really helps build the channel and get a lot more information to you that will be applicable in your life today. That's what we're after, not big theories, but what's applicable in people's lives. So we have a series of guests that we've already done and a series coming up, including this amazing woman today, Jordan. It's just fantastic because they've overcome those self-sabotaging behaviors and continue to fight that good fight. So I could go through a long list of credentials here with Jordan, but it really gets down to something that really strikes my heart. And so, Jordan, I want to welcome you to the call. You can get in touch with Jordan at Blue Star Credit Services.com, bluestarcreditservices.com. There'll be a link down below because she provides a phenomenal service for people. Everybody knows that the stress of debt is a backbreaker, both physically, emotionally, mentally, and actually can break you down spiritually too. So the reason that I'm going to skip a whole bunch of credentials, amazing track record, you can see it at our website at bluestarcreditservices.com. But my belief and the whole reason that we have this channel is to help people break through the conditioning they've had. It's generally in the subconscious or the unconscious level of the mind. So we didn't even know that we've been conditioned. And this is a woman that runs a business, has a high energy husband that's a cockeyed optimist, always difficult for nurturing personalities to deal with sometimes. And we'll talk about that later. My wife deals with the same conflict, Jordan, all the time, you know. And but basically, the thing that just lights me up around Jordan is she made the decision to homeschool the twins to keep their imagination intact. We all know the second great robbery of our imagination in the history of the world is taking place right now in the early 20s. It was the ether with people like Charles Haanel and Tesla and all that. They wanted to sequester them and call it woo-woo stuff. And now we see artificial intelligence, which certainly has some great value in terms of expediting how things can get done. But you have to be careful that it's not stealing your imagination. And this is such an important thing. And I can't tell you how much admiration I have for you to homeschool. Before we get to you, can you tell us about why you decided to homeschool? Because how old are the twins now?
They're 9.
9. Okay. And I'm telling you like the macro picture. What's the micro picture based on your background and your understanding of quote unquote how it works, the conditioning that we got, and the separation that we feel? I know you did when you were in school. I think it was around middle school that you started to feel this separation from your spiritual soul or self. Why did you decide to homeschool, and was that a tough decision?
The backbone of it is I feel that it took about a decade or two to resuscitate what I lost from the schooling that I had. I'm sure the teachers did the best they could, I mean, no harm in saying that, but I lost a part of myself in that sort of machine, and it took years to resuscitate and rebuild that. And many seminars and painting, and I didn't want my children to have to go through that. I wanted to spare them that pain, and I think that at the end of the day is like the primary motivator. Certainly the next step, knowing that and believing that, the next step was sort of coming face to face with this reality inside myself. It's like, well, who am I to think I can homeschool? And then I realized, well, I'd had this unconscious belief that I couldn't. And how did I develop that belief? Whoever told me that I couldn't teach my children to read? So I talked to other women for a couple of years while the kids were like 2, 3 years old, other women that had done it. And that gave me some belief. And the big hurdle was, listen, if I could teach my children to read and do basic math, I felt like I could do anything. So once I was able to break through that with a lot of support, primarily other women that had done it, it was an eye opener. And then it was as though, after I made that decision and I believed that I could do this, and all of a sudden I'd see these little moments with my children where we'd be in the backyard and, they'd be looking at little bugs and dirt, and I would explain how things work. And they were learning and absorbing and interested, and it just lit a fire in me, because I thought this is how learning should be. And when I talked to administration teams in different schools, because I was still looking at preschools and different options, Montessori, and so I had self-doubt, right? So I was constantly checking, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? But what I learned is that from people that had a master's degree is that this type of learning was actually called emergent learning and was real, and it was naturally occurring in my family with my children. And I thought, there's something to this, I think that really gave me some momentum and more courage. I definitely needed courage.
Yeah. So one of the things that we talk about, I'm going to circle back to that in a second, but one of the things that we like to get our guests to share is everybody knows to grow professionally, you have to grow personally. It's just the way that it is. You don't grow professionally and then become a better person or a better version of yourself. The best version of yourself is going to produce across the board in your intimate relationship, your family, your friends, and even with the Lord, the better that we can connect with ourselves. And so the great debate that we ask people to settle, and all that really matters is how you feel about it. And I know our listeners want to know how you feel about it. Is personal growth and then a healthy mindset, or do you need a healthy mindset to start to grow personally? What would be the thing you would suggest people to focus on, since you've had so much personal growth? Did that start with a healthy mindset, or did the growth lead to a healthy mindset?
Wow, that's a tough question.
Yeah, it is.
I think the answers came from the heart, and then giving myself permission to listen to my heart and trust the instinct as a mother.
Mm-hmm.
There's this natural occurrence that happens between a mother and child, and I'm sure between father and child too, that there's this sort of inner knowing in the bond. But that came later as I became a mother. Earlier in my deep dive into myself to try to understand who I'd become and why, that was a moment. Actually, I remember I was driving over the San Rafael Bridge. Larry was driving. We had just been married. And there was this moment and this sort of switch that I wanted to transform, that I wanted to change my life. And I think it was that decision. I didn't know how or what that looked like, but I think it was that. And then the personal growth came, and then the mindset, because I didn't understand what mindset was until I'd gotten to a certain place with the process. So maybe, to be quite honest, it may have taken about 5 years for me to even understand what mindset was all about. So personally, I had to grow first.
Right. Okay. So basically what happened for you, I think, is what happens to a lot of people. Most of the people that tune in regularly, if you don't know, I'll give you the short story, have degrees in both English and education, and took my master's in education. And, one of the things the American school system based on is the Prussian school system, which is all about control. The kids go to school, you can be anything you want to be. You can be a ball player, you can be an actress, you can be president, you can be anything you want to be, but you better follow the rules like everybody else. Because if you don't, you'll go to the principal's office, and if you go 3 times, you get kicked out of school and you're going to live in a box under a bridge. But you can be anything you want to be. This mixed message that we get of control And I know that you had a relationship, a spiritual relationship when you were a younger child. You had shared that with me. And then it shifted, which is normal for people. Let's face it, the schools are producing consumers. They don't want critical thinkers. And so, what happened to you? Tell me about that shift that you had in middle school and felt that you kind of lost who you were, because that's really what the machine wants, right? They want compliant workers, and they don't want critical thinkers, which is one way to say it. That's my way to say it. You may have another spin on it. And to recover from that, I think has to be traced to the shift that initially happened to you. For you, it was around middle school, right?
Right. Yeah, it was in that sixth grade window, that transition from elementary, fifth grade into sixth grade. Um, fifth grade, I was still very much in my creative mind, spent a lot of time in the library, at home, a lot of time in my imagination. Um, I I prayed, but I didn't have any religious upbringing. I just was talking to God. Maybe I was talking to my higher self. I don't know. That's another topic.
It's another topic. Yeah.
But anyway, the big shift was this massive change in the sixth grade. And it was, and looking back, it was really an abandonment of self. Because suddenly we go from, or I had gone from having one teacher to having several different teachers. So that sort of security, everything was all fractured up into different classes, and we're learning all kinds of different topics. And why are we learning these things? And um, I had abandoned a part of myself that I was connected to, but it also, there's a lot of bullying. There was one afternoon where a circle of girls, I don't know, 8 to 12, they encircled me and just told me all the reasons why they hated me. And I didn't have any protection or understanding as to why are people like this. Looking back, it may have been their own self-hatred that they cast upon me, but that's another topic.
Right.
Um, it was that, who do I become? What am I to be in this new space of middle school? There is a huge leap of faith that children, I think, take from fifth grade to sixth grade. And there's little guidance and big risk for that imagination to be lost. But I would have to really do even a deeper dive into why that happened so significantly at sixth grade, but it just continued on from sixth grade, seventh, eighth, on through high school. I felt that I had to fit into a box, but I didn't feel that I belonged. So I felt very lost
Right. Right.
and um, made up for that in other ways that I think were not healthy and took me away from myself. And so I was more interested in getting validation from teachers in the outside
Mhm.
world
Sure.
than validation within myself. So
Right.
the big disconnect from, the heart and mind. It's like, well, how do you rebuild that bridge from heart and mind? That's really critical. And that infrastructure is not supported in the school system at all. And with my children, I am primal about protecting it. I want them to always know whatever they need to say it. Better out than in.
Right.
Understanding their learning style. It's, in the school system that I grew up in here in California, it's a one size fits all, and children learn differently. I look at my son and my daughter, they're the same age, came from the same mother, the same father, yet they learn completely differently. And
Right.
it took a good 1 to 2 years to really understand what helped them excel, absorb information, and what repelled them. And maybe there's a lot of boredom that I experienced in
Yeah.
high school.
Yeah. And this is such an important thing. There was a NASA study done by Dr. Landon, and I suggest all our listeners go look it up. Don't take my word for it. Either accept this as fact or go look it up. Don't dismiss it, because it speaks to Jordan's point and the sacrifice, because it is a sacrifice to homeschool. But if you don't make that sacrifice, then you're sacrificing your kids, right? And so, so it's a little challenging sometimes physically and emotionally to take care of that and take care of everything else. But Land's study in NASA, they were looking for smart people as NASA was expanding. And they got the idea, somebody got the idea to start testing younger and younger. As it turns out, the bell-shaped curve, 2% idiots, 2% genius, 17% slightly below, 17% slightly above, and everybody else is average. Well, it turns out that's completely wrong. Land discovered that 98% of 5-year-olds are creative geniuses. And so they go to the school, and what he discovered was they teach compliance rather than in getting people to conform rather than the individual. So the individual has always been a threat to the machine. So congratulations for preserving that, because it's a big thing to do. I mean, what we try to help people understand, and you're certainly help people understand right now from both motherhood, and we'll get into your business and how helpful that is to other people in a couple of minutes. But basically, imagine a purpose that you have in life that's not driven by the conditioning you've had. We always say, well, I'm not looking for approval. Really? Why do you live where you live, drive what you drive, dress like you dress? And you'll find that most of your friends or associates are pretty much the same type of thing. That's that unconscious, and I certainly had it too, Jordan, unconscious approval seeking. I wanted to fit in. As Dr. Seuss said, why try to fit in when you were born to stand out? So again, big kudos for trying to preserve that. And so we have this situation where if people can shed the conditioning and listen to their heart, which is what you were talking about, everybody knows that ego is not amigo. And that's what gets fed is ego. We're constantly comparing and measuring ourselves. And I know that you've moved past that, but there was something fascinating that happened as you continue to get separated from your true self and went on to college. You ended up sort of being famous, right, in a reality show, and that really kind of opened up to you, as I understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong or expand on it. That you started to see how much influence the media has unconsciously on us and how we're not making our own choices. Can you talk about how I think everybody thinks they'd like to be famous to some degree, or at least well known. And you found there was a heavy price with that. And additionally, the bigger nugget, I think, for you, or a shock or whatever, you'll explain it to us, is this enormous amount of influence. Because you were even bigger than the Gilmore Girls, as I understand it, right? More followers and viewers and all that. Can you tell us about that and what that experience was like and what it taught you?
Well, it's almost as though, I mean, it was a tremendous opportunity and painful at the same time. The pain that I felt afterwards was sort of this shock of, in this country, and there's nothing wrong with media, right? I don't want to completely, red X it. However, it is a very powerful machine. And watching myself, I was witnessing who I'd become in that machine. And that was a huge shock, while also getting this unique opportunity to see the other side of the curtain and have people come up to me and ask me questions as though they knew me, or they gave me this sort of power that I didn't want or understand. And I felt this wave of, wow, this is a massive responsibility when you put yourself out there. And I didn't feel that I was ready for that, or even had become responsible for such a privilege. And there's a lot I could say about it, but I think what it sort of cracked me open, because I was seeing myself from the outside in a way that a lot of people celebrated, but I didn't celebrate it. I saw sadness. I felt, my goodness, what happened? What happened to that 8-year-old little girl that, would spend hours in her room just creating and making worlds and just studying? I mean, what happened? So that opened up this space within me that felt like, quite honestly, like a void. And it consumed me for quite some time. And I had a choice to make, how do I want to fill this void? So I chose to take the path of, Eastern medicine, painting, studied texts that were written thousands of years ago, instead of looking to media today. Again, not that it's all bad, but it is a tremendously powerful machine that can be weaponized to form identities. And I have been formed in a way without my consent.
Right.
And if I would have given the choice to look back all those years ago, I would have turned off the television at 8 and said, "Hey, let me just go out into the wild and see who I become." Um, but it was a gift looking back, because now I can take that learning and the experience and channel all of that, the good and the bad, into what I do today with my children, and also with work, marriage, friends. But to get to that point, honestly, it took a lot of not sabotaging the progress that I was making, because for many years I thought, well, who am I to have been given an opportunity like this? I felt unworthy. And I felt a great deal of shame, because there I was, and the irony maybe is, there I am on a reality television searching for my identity and my roots, and also feeling rejection on the show. And then feeling, after the show was done, rejection from myself. So where do I go? How do I recalibrate? How do I rebuild? Well, the answer, it's actually, I think, a Joseph Campbell quote, something about the caves. Maybe you can help me out here, Mark. It's the answer, the cave you fear holds the treasure you seek, or something like that.
Right. Yep.
So I did a deep, so that's where I went, a deep dive within myself.
Right.
And my goodness, that was a terrifying but rewarding journey.
Right.
And I'm still on it, like all of us. I mean, we're all on that journey.
Yeah.
I just hope that somehow what I've learned can help others in their building blocks.
Well, you are helping others, but and we're going to get to that in a minute, because I think it's a huge thing right now. It's another way the machine controls everything, right? We all know, all the way back to the Romans and before, they do three things: scare us, demoralize us, and bring us to the circus, right? That's what they do. The Romans did it. They brought people to the Colosseum, showed them animals, and then people got, because nobody saw anything on TV then. So this was amazing. But after a few months, they were bored with that. So then they started killing Christians, and they got bored with that. And then they had the gladiators, and they could bet on the games. And what's the difference between that and the National Football League right now? Nothing. I mean, people aren't dying, but they are of, these consistent concussions that they have and so forth. But back to you, it feels like this entertainment created this image of you, and that you were in conflict with it because it wasn't really you. They're enjoying this image I have, but that's not me, and you were kind of lost. And then you found a pathway to have some gratitude around it. It feels like, because, like you said, and I love this, it cracked you open. This is when in Campbell's hero's journey, he says, where you stumble, there's your treasure, right? There it is, right there. And so this stumble probably heightened this conflict that had started back in junior high, right?
Exactly.
And the power of this machine. And so as you started to heal, we all know that, today, men and women don't go out and hunt for animals and forage. We go to the grocery store, and what's become the new thing to hunt is money. And of course, the machine wants to manipulate us, and they lie constantly. I love it when a credit card says 1.5% interest, right? So buy a dining room set for $2,000 and make the minimum payment, you'll pay $8,145 for it, right? So you should just eat on your table until you save the $2,000 if you really need to have it. But anyway, people end up in debt, and this is the what people don't realize about debt is that the governments have a printing press. Okay, so anybody that has some money, it hurts them, because now the value of their dollar goes down. And I don't know about you, Jordan, but Davine and Larry, but Davine and I didn't get our printing press, so we get in debt, and we can't go print money like the government can, right? and it's a burden, and it affects us. I believe it affects people physically from the stress, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, that they lose themselves thinking that their value is getting out of debt. And you help people with that at Blue Star Credit Services. Tell us about that, and some of the challenges that people have, and one or two tips that you can give people to, besides don't ever put anything on a credit card, right? um,
An interesting thing because um, really debt is credit. You can't have a good credit score without debt. So you do have to pay to play. It's just how do you do that in a way where you're consenting to this game and you understand the rules. A lot of people don't understand the rules. I was given a credit card before I even understood what credit was. I was outside of Planet Hollywood in San Francisco. I quite honestly don't even know if I must have been 18. What the heck was credit? You know, I was at my first day of college and I'm outside the college bookstore. And this is, when we had dial up modems, there was no real, internet. It was just kind of starting up. But outside the bookstore were little clipboards, these representatives from Visa, MasterCard, and all these students are going in and there's like signing up. They don't know what they're signing up for. They're getting a credit card so they can go and purchase more books. And so that's just an interesting background. But and it's going to sound a little odd, but in this journey, as I stepped away from the entertainment world, I had to make a living, right? Like everybody else. So what was I going to do? Well, I started in a mortgage company and fell in love with credit reports. That sounds funny, but it's absolutely the truth. What are these reports? What is this about? What does this measure? So that was about 20 years ago. So I've been in this specialty for almost 20 years. I've maybe reviewed 20, 30,000 reports. I don't even know at this point. Here's what I've learned about credit. It is sort of a reflection of how people feel about themselves, but also their education and understanding how credit works. When I help somebody, a lot of times they've gone through a divorce, they've had a trauma. They have not been taught generationally how credit even works. So with the repairing of their credit comes a story. And it's about creating that safe space for them to open up and understand how it is they made the decisions they did, or revisiting the pain of the past, the divorce. How did it get that way? And then really reconciling that with integrity, which is what I give, and then we rebuild. So as I started doing that years and years ago, the more I helped other people, what I realized I was helping myself. The more I listened to other people, I was listening to myself. And when we step out of our selfishness and we help other people, we are really helping ourselves. I was growing as I was hearing these incredible stories and people from all walks of life, backgrounds, and I just sort of fell in love with being able to help people in that way and make a difference in their life, and teach them how it works, and sort of just, this is maybe another topic, but nobody knows the secret sauce, the secret scoring algorithm of FICO or Vantage Score, and nobody, until they do a deep dive or learn. I like to explain, why do you have 20 different credit scores? It's very confusing to people. They look at these credit scores online and then they go to get financing when they're trying to purchase a home, car, and then business. I'll come back to that in a minute. That's a one I wanted to touch on. And then their score is completely different. It's like, well, what gives? What in the world? And this is a big deal because it can make the difference of hundreds of dollars a month in payments for them, or thousands. And then nowadays, what we're seeing is, or I'm seeing a lot of just in the last few months, is people trying to get SBA loans from the government to build their business. And their credit scores are being hit really hard right now with student loans because there's not a lot of information out there that's truthful as far as why are people that thought they were in a loan deferment or forbearance with the U.S. Department of Education, why are they mysteriously seeing these lates out of nowhere? So that's just interesting right now. And so what I really enjoy doing is listening, being a sounding board, because I feel that people sort of own that blame and shame, and it's not theirs to own, because there's flaws and errors in the system. And I feel that the more I explain that, it alleviates pressure, and now they can think clearly, and their thinking is oriented towards their credit, and they're not associating it with their identity. I think sometimes people see their worth in their credit score, but it's just
Right.
me.
It's just a number. Yeah, it's such a great point. It's so easy to forget in today's world. I mean, if you look at buildings in the 20s, the biggest buildings in town and before that were churches. And then in the 40s, because the war, World War II, escalated production. And so the biggest buildings were the factories. Everybody worked at the factory or sold to people that worked in the factory, whatever. And then now the biggest building is financial institutions. So we can see what the masses have been taught to worship, to hold as their value. And they forget they were made first class by first class, and they're entitled to go first class as long as they do a first class job, like you are, of being in service to other people. So if people can contact you, get a consult with you, and get some education, and then decide whether or not they want to work with you. Is that basically
Yeah.
that you invite people in? And again, the link will be down there. If you're having trouble, or if you're confused, or if you're like me, I went classic, went from my 20s into my 30s, and I had this idea, like most people, that you could borrow your way out of debt, and you just can't do it. This is not, not understanding, well, business is going to get better, so I'll pile on more debt. But anyway, it's a great service because I think it's so crucial what you said. They do have their identity wrapped up in this number. It's like getting on the scale in the morning and you were 220 yesterday, and today you're 222, and you ate really good yesterday, and it ruins your whole day. It's just an illusion, right? We're here to love each other and to help each other, and service around educating people around credit scores. It was funny you said that. I was wondering the same thing as soon as you touched on it. Why do I have 6 different credit scores? What's the deal on that? Anyway, so get in touch with Jordan. That's bluestarcreditservices.com. So let's talk about transformation. So all these things happen to transform you. You found something. We love for people to take color code. You can go to Lazy Color Code, Lazy Network, or colorcode.com and get your primary color. You don't have to pay for the report. You can if you want, but just get a primary color. So blue personality types are built around intimacy and helping other people. And obviously, you found a way to help other people with actual information, not theoretical nonsense, which is really great, the magic pill. And to be able to do these things, to move away from quote unquote fame and seeing that as the voice inside you was louder than the voice outside. Something told you, I need to do this. And that's transformation. And we love to share with people, hey, let's be candid about it. Everybody's going to tell you it's easy. And if they do, they have something to sell you. Okay. Transformation is hard. Everybody looks at the butterfly, moves from this bug to a caterpillar, and then it's this beautiful butterfly. I bet it's not a lot of fun having all that trapped inside that cocoon. If you've ever watched it, and Davine and I were out at the University of Kansas, it's our charity that we contribute to. 10% of what comes in goes to preserving the monarch butterfly. So get in touch with the University of Kansas. They will send you milkweed, and you can become part of that migration of these butterflies. So that whole thing of them flying 3,000 miles, coming out, it's a perfect example of misrepresentation of transformation. Okay. It's not easy to transform, and you transformed. I know it was difficult. It's difficult. But the rewards are extraordinary because you've reclaimed your authentic self. I know you went through the Master Keys experience. Did that help you in any way with the challenges that you faced? Tell us about transformation, your feeling about the difficulty of it, and where you were able to get some help.
I was on the path. I think it was in 2018. I did the course. I was at a plateau. quite honestly. I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know what tools I needed. I I just had this sort of visceral feeling of where I wanted to be. But what happened is, so I mean, I still have my definite major purpose, I still have the binders. I think what the course did is, and I'm just realizing this, is it created a safe space, kind of like I helped create a safe space for people with their credit for stuff. It created a space and an understanding of how does the mind work? Not that any of us know exactly all the answers, of course, but with your assistance and your team that you have, it gave voice and answers and language to me that I could start to put some pieces together and build something that I couldn't quite see or put words to. The part that really got me was the beginning when you're like, when you said, what do you want? Gee, I was I was stuck because I had never really asked myself that question. And how are you supposed to calibrate your future if you don't really know what you want? And how are you supposed to calibrate a future based on a lie? And what I mean by that is if you're living for the world without, for an image, which is what the machine creates, you're not going to wind up in an authentic space and you won't be happy. So what I ended up learning, and I don't remember what process you had called it, but the two things that I desperately wanted was the liberty and true health. That was important to me. And we did some digging in the course to get to that point, to understand what was authentically important to me. And then what do I want? And then start to understand, Emerson, Hennel, some of these thinkers of old that, to my knowledge, the media doesn't really put out there. Just to go back and understand the mind before the technology what it is today.
Yeah.
And the course was so powerful. And it gave me a lot of hope. And I was able to use the tools and the process that I was already on and integrate that in to what was going to take me to the next level. And oh my goodness, I mean, it brought me face to face with the sabotage that I was continually creating for myself. And so that really helped me understand, because it's almost as though my heart had the feeling, but my mind wasn't allowing it to come through. And it's like, well, what is this in my mind that is preventing this authentic voice in life? It's like my mind was telling my heart, you don't have permission. Okay. How do I do that? How do I undo that?
Yeah.
Programming?
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Yeah. Yeah, that's that whole thing. I mean, what Land found out in his study, the way they kill the creative genius and individuality is they teach convergent thinking. So we're constantly comparing, competing, and those types of things rather than creating, which is what the divergent mind will do. Like you said, you give two kids the same information, they're going to interpret it differently, they're going to play with it differently. And why not let them do that? Why not let them explore? No, you have to behave, which is the big takeaway I'm getting from you, was that you talked about briefly, if you could just expand on it for a minute or two, if you'd like, as we come in for a landing here, that you became incredibly aware of how much influence the media has. I mean, I always like to say, ask a kid what his best day was, and they never tell you that this day they were watching TV by themselves. It's always something with another person, which is what Campbell talked about. We're supposed to be connected. And let's face it, social media is anything but social. Okay. It's more separation, opinion, and the machine uses it to stir up heat, but that's another whole call. So
Right.
this idea that sort of awoke in you to the incredible amount of influence the media has in shaping our values. Could you expand on that a little bit?
It's as though, because from my understanding, the mind, the unconscious mind doesn't know what's real from what isn't. And what I learned about myself from watching television, which I don't watch just television, I choose now, am I going to watch a documentary? Am I going to watch something that's going to teach me something? That way, hopefully I'm not programmed. But one thing that I found interesting is when you watch a television show, you start to relate to a character. And I think that's probably the intention behind a lot of story writing, is they want you to relate to the character and then you take on the identity of the character. And for me, and I feel very unsafe there, because then there's a blurred line between, well, who am I versus what's the character? But from a creative standpoint, I don't want the noise in creating my authentic future. It needs to be just coming from me. And that's what I want for my children too. I want them to be able to differentiate what is truly coming from their authentic voice and their dreams, and what is coming from the outside world. That is critical because it has a direct correlation, I feel, to happiness. I feel happy. I feel happiest when I'm in my authentic place. And painting really helped a lot because it's just me and the paintbrush and the canvas, and that's it. There is not a filter in between. And with media becomes this filter in between that sort of dictates unconsciously who we become. And who we become is everything. I mean, I want for children, especially now with AI, I want for children and generations coming up to understand the power of that machine. And it is there making a lot of money. Okay, fine. But understand what it is and how it's impacting your mind. Like, for example, with my children, if they watch something, I can tell a certain tone is not them just because they've been watching something on television that is picking up the frequency or essence of another character. And then I, pull back. And if I put them into school, if I were to ever do that, how in the world would I know who's influencing what? How am I going to help them safeguard their identity, who their essences as best I can, if I can't see what's influencing them for half the day? And that is, I guess, what makes me the most motivated to continue in this journey, in this process, is that, because with AI coming in, man, we as a species have to be able to understand the influence of media. And
Absolutely.
I don't want to say it's all bad, because I think it can work for good, but when it's working towards evil ends, selfishness, greed, it's not good.
Right. Such a great point. Boy, you just opened up. We could go on for 4 hours about that. But folks, obviously, this is a remarkable woman who's making choices that might seem difficult or unusual. But the reality is, it's about loving the potential inside her children. And by doing that, she's developing her potential. I know that your paintings changed as you started to heal. Would love to talk to you about that another time. We always wrap up the same way, with asking you just quick, impulsive answers. We know that they might be very different tomorrow or even an hour from now. But first question, what is your favorite word?
Hello.
Okay. What's your least favorite word?
Goodbye.
Okay. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally? What turns you on, Jordan?
The power of the mind to transform, and this, I mean, we have as humans this incredible access within ourselves, and when we tap into it, man, it's like it's better than anything you can get outside of the world. And for all I know, that's love. I don't know. Maybe we'll get there and understanding it. But
Yeah, for our listeners here, John Novello was on a couple of weeks ago. He calls it the silent architect. I call it the intuitive visitor. Call it what you want, but get in touch with it. And it's here. It's not here. It's not why you so beautifully talked about being influenced by. What turns you off?
hmm, a person with a closed mind that doesn't know they have a closed mind, that isn't willing to know that they have a closed mind.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Because
Okay.
they don't know, they don't know, they don't know. And how do you grow?
What sound or noise do you love?
Birds, the sound of birds.
Interesting thing about birds. I learned this when I moved to Kauai because I like getting up around 4 o'clock in the morning and hearing the island wake up. When you hear the reason so many people say birds and they don't know why. Here's why we love the sound of birds. When birds are chirping, okay, and making noise, there's no predators around. It's safety. Very important for blue personality types, right? Which is important. What sound or noise do you hate?
The sound of the chalks screeching reminds me of my third grade classroom.
Is there any other profession that you would like to attempt?
Public speaking. With
Do it. You're awesome. You got presence, girl. Okay. What profession would you not like to try?
anything that puts a box around me, anything in a cubicle.
Yeah. Okay. Good answer. Okay. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Good job.
I'm sure you are doing a great job. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Dave, we're wrapped up, which is good.